All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to another webinar, an Ask MNLCT webinar. These webinars are exclusive to us and they are focused on the industry that we work on as the Mennonite New Life Center of Toronto. As you may know, we are involved in settlement needs, education, language education, bridging programs, providing mental health counseling to clients, mainly newcomers and vulnerable individuals, refugees, just to name a few. So the Ask MLCT webinar series is a platform where we share our ideas and provide all the questions that you may have, answers to your questions through our panel of specialists that we have on board. So today's topic is about maintaining your PR status in Canada. And we have an excellent guest speaker. But before I introduce everyone, I would like to acknowledge the land that we are all sitting on today or standing on. It gives me a great honor to acknowledge the land that we are meeting on today. I am based in the Halton region, and this region is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. Now, this traditional territory is of many nations, including the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaty. And from a personal point of view, as with an open heart, the ancestors of this land have always welcomed newcomers for thousands of years. So I'm very humbled and grateful to be here in form and spirit. If there's anything to learn from this journey, is that we give love and honor to our Mother Nature as she has bestowed life and love to all living things, past and present. And just from a cultural point of view, today is a full moon this week, and it's a special one. It's called the wolf moon in native culture. So if you are interested, you can look it up and find out more about the significance of the full moon. So it's a very blessed day. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for our participants. We're really happy to see, I recognize a lot of names. Today's panel consists of Ling Ling, who's one of our staff members. She works on the settlement team. She's been with us for the past 12 years. And she's been dealing in this matter for many years. Alongside, we have a translation. Also on our settlement team is Bisan, who speaks Arabic and is willing to take any of your questions. If we have any Arabic-speaking people out there, or Mandarin, or Spanish, we can support in those three languages. We have Natalia Rodriguez as well with us today from the settlement team, who also works and can also speak in Spanish. And without any further introduction, he's quite well known in the community, is Prasanna. He's joining us today out of the kindness of his heart. Prasanna Balasundaram is a staff lawyer from Downtown Legal Services. He's been working for the past decade in the field, and he's worked closely with refugees and immigration, immigrants. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you very much. Just to remind everyone about asking your questions. So you can feel free to ask your questions. It's by raising your hand, as you can see, or you can type in your questions in the Q&A. Some people like to type their questions into the chat room, but I prefer the Q&A. And if you raise your hand, we'll give you the floor as well. We'd love to hear from you. So do not hesitate to jump in at any point in time and ask questions. All right, so let me start with you, Ling Ling. I want to thank you very much for joining us again. I want to start with you. Tell us a little bit. I know you deal a lot with PR cards, and many people have questions about if I lose my PR card, or if If it runs out, expires, what do I do? Am I no more eligible to become a citizen of Canada, or am I not a resident anymore? I'm sure you faced that question many times, right?
Yes. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, introduce myself again. My name is Ling Ling. I'm the settlement worker at the Manonline ULF Center. I can speak both English and Mandarin. So if you need any Mandarin translation or interpretation, I'm rather here to help you. And so as a settlement worker, we are serving the clients every day. So they coming us for any kind of government applications like permanent resident card application, citizenship application. So among those services, permanent resident card application and the citizen application are the one of the top categories of services we have done for our clients. And so permanent resident card application, it's a very simple application, but they have a lot of other questions related. Like say, also people will ask us if I lose my permanent residence, how can I do? If my permanent resident card expired and I'm not in Canada, what can I do? Or if I cannot meet the physical residence um, based on the PR card requirement, what can I do? So those are questions mostly asked by the newly immigrants or our clients. So our job is here to answer any questions you have in this field. And also we help to fill in the forms for you, like say, help you to fill in the permanent resident card application form, to help you to fill in the Canadian citizenship application form. So feel free to call us at 416-291-3248 or 647-776-2057 to book appointment with one of our settlement workers. Yeah. So some basic knowledge or information about the permanent resident card. So we know the PR card is used to show your permanent resident status in Canada. And you needed to show your permanent resident card and also your passport to when you return to Canada by any commercial vehicle like airplane, bus, train, all kind of, these methods. And we also know we needed to be physically present in Canada in 730 days or 2 years in the past 5 years before you submit your application. So this is the basic information we needed to know as you as a permanent resident in Canada holding the permanent resident card. Yeah. So
Yeah. Mhm. No, thanks for that. So a lot of times is I get this question myself. I mean, I've heard this question a lot about when people travel outside of Canada, whether they can travel right before it's about to expire because they have an emergency travel. So you've got 1 month on your PR card, and then if you're there and overstay your welcome wherever you are, and your PR card expires, what do you do? I'm sure you faced a lot of those questions before.
yeah, so some of the clients they are like out of Canada and their PR card is expired at that time. So what we needed to do, like you needed to apply for the permanent resident travel document to return to Canada. And once you meet the physical presence in Canada, you can send your PR card renew application as soon as possible to get a new PR card. And normally the PR card is valid for 5 years.
So basically, you cannot travel without a PR card, right? That's a no.
Yeah, without PR card or travel document. Yeah.
Right. So let's say you do end up in a situation like this where your PR card does expire, you are out of the country in your country of origin, and you're like, oops, what do I do now? Who do you contact? Prasanna, I know we were talking about this earlier. You've had clients who have faced this, especially if they're immigrants, or what do you advise them if they're stuck out? Your mic is muted.
Thanks, Miles. So I just want to say I did just throw up a link to the travel document application that Ling Ling just mentioned. So in terms of general advice, what I'd say is prior to travel, where possible, ensure that your PR card is not going to expire in the next 6 months. Okay, even if you have travel plans to return within the period wherein you feel like your PR card will not expire, you just don't know how your travel plans might change and how you might not be able to return within that window that you had planned. So I'd say, as a general piece of advice, do not travel if your permanent resident card is going to be expired within the time frame of your travel. The second thing I would say is ensure that you've made copies of all of your relevant immigration documents that are accessible either online, or you keep it with a trusted family member that might be able to send it to you if you need it. So my suggestion would be to scan and store a copy of your permanent resident card, a copy of your passport, any immigration documentation, including your confirmation of permanent residence. It's COPR, and scan that, upload that to a cloud, and it's accessible if you need it. If you do find yourself in a situation where you are overseas and you are looking to return to Canada, but find that your PR card has expired, just as Ling Ling said, you won't be able to board a commercial airline, for example, in order to return to Canada. What you need to do is essentially fill out, and I'm going to try and share my screen. Hopefully this works. So in the link that I provided you, oh, sorry, I accidentally clicked on something else. Okay, here you go. So the IRCC has a website that is dedicated exactly to this scenario. What happens if my permanent resident card expires while I'm outside? And essentially, what you do is you have to apply for and receive a permanent resident travel document, or a PRTD. And this website, and the link is provided in the chat, essentially sets out the specific instructions that you need to follow in order to apply for the PRTD. There's a specific form to fill. Here you will have to fill out the residency obligation, as Ling Ling mentioned. In order to maintain your PR status, you have to generally be in Canada for at least 2 years over a 5-year period. So that's the same as the 730 days. The 730 days do not have to be one after another, and a part of a day counts as a full day. So I just want to make you aware of that this is one of the ways in which, if you're overseas and are looking to return to Canada, that you're going to have to show that you meet that residency obligation. Just while I have the screen, one of the other tips that I would suggest is, along with scanning and storing all of your relevant travel documents and immigration documents, I would say keep a travel journal which records all of your journeys in and out of Canada. This will just be very helpful in ensuring that you can accurately fill out any form that requires proof of your residency or details about your residency. And it's very helpful if there is a concern about whether or not you have maintained your residency in order to preserve your permanent resident status. You can say, look, here's a detailed record of all of my travel dates, and you can see how we can do the math to ensure that you meet that 720-day requirement.
That's quite excellent advice. I remember when I was applying, I think I was trying to renew the PR card at one point, and luckily I'm kind of like, I keep everything in order, so I do keep track. And I missed out like a day where I went across the border for like an hour, came back on Niagara Falls. and I didn't count that day, but that does count like as a day. And I was questioned about it. Like, I mean, the officer was really nice. He was like, I said, oh, okay, I didn't know you had to put that in. But no, that's excellent advice. I mean, because when you come to calculate those days later on, you'll find it so much quicker and easier to do. You know, on that point, actually, we have a question coming in, and I think that pertains to you as well. It's from Martha, who seems to be working. She works in an agency, and she says she's been assisting a client that got stuck in Salvador for over 6 months. Now, she says the Canadian embassy over there is closed, so there are no flights from that country to Canada. So, what can that person do? I don't know if anyone can advise, or would you have advice on that?
I mean, it's really difficult to provide sort of general advice at this time, just because it's such a dynamic situation in terms of travel availability. I expect that part of the reason, or at least the reason why this person might be stuck in El Salvador is because of the pandemic. Is that right? Or
I think so. Yeah, the pandemic. I mean, I know our team, Ling, Natalia as well, and Bisan. You've worked with. You're facing issues like this, right? With clients. I don't know if anyone has something. Have you faced similar situations because of the pandemic over the year?
Like say, example, if a client was in his or her own country, but she wants, or like the person wants to come back because of the pandemic, they cannot return to Canada, and like the PR card is maybe expiring soon. So in that case, we still needed to think about the situation, and like say if the PR card is not expired, and we can wait until the pandemic is over and that person can return to Canada. But if, like, say, the PR card is expired, so she needs to wait until the embassy or visa office is open and apply for the PRTB travel document to return. And if the government needs more additional information or any kind of things, we can always provide an explanation letter to indicating what kind of the situation at that moment and what kind of the difficulties facing when I was in that situation. So government will take a look at this kind of explanation, will take this into account to considering your application.
Yeah, Natalia, you have something to say as well, but I want to just before that, Martha is saying here in the chat room that basically you are right. She hasn't been able to come back because of the pandemic. So her concern is she's going to lose her PR status. Is she going to lose it? Natalia, I wanted to hear from you as well.
Hi, everyone. So in that case, when clients are stuck in another country and they can come back and they have the risk of losing their PR status, I believe that because it's something that they don't have control, they can't write a letter if they have all the proof that they were not allowed to come back, or they couldn't come back on time because there was, in that situation, I don't know, but I can imagine that nowadays a lot of people may face similar situations. But also I would like to say, like if someone, for example, have a PR card that is about to expire or expire while the person is outside Canada and the visa application center is not open, is closed, because another thing is where to apply, where to send the application, how to process the permanent resident travel document if you are outside Canada. Where do you go, for example, right? There are visa application centers where you normally go there with the application form and all the supporting documents. But because of the COVID-19, some of the visa application centers around the world are temporarily closed. So what to do in that situation? So if you go to the website, you can see that you can actually email the application. And that's a remedy. right? If you cannot go to the visa application center in your country of origin or in the country you are at that time, you have another option to apply for a permanent resident travel document. Now, if you are losing your PR status because you don't have the time, you don't have the residential, you don't meet with the residency obligations, that is another procedure. I don't know if it's clear, but I would like to confirm with Prasanna if he can add, further explanation on this point, so maybe the clients can understand the difference and see what can they do, in that situation. Thank you.
Yeah, and
thank you.
Yeah, because actually, then thanks for that, because I would like to add, Prasanna, as you answer that question, because we have a client who's also dancing around that same question, and he raised something pretty interesting, is what is the point of view of the government? Is there a definitive answer that we see from the government? Because you, as a legal expert, Prasanna, you would probably know what the government's take on this. How do they see the situation?
Yeah. Firstly, I just want to say, like, I would echo all of the great advice that Ling Ling and Natalia have provided. I think it's bang on practical advice. Let me just take a step back and maybe explain a little bit about the process so that the participants have some sense of what it is that they might face in a situation. So first, I want to be very clear. You do not lose your permanent resident status automatically if you've been outside of Canada for too long, okay? You're still a permanent resident until there has been an explicit positive decision to strip you of your permanent resident status. So to address the concern of Martha's client who's in El Salvador and fearing that because they can't return to Canada, that merely by remaining in El Salvador, they're going to lose their permanent resident status. That's simply not the case, okay? Now, that being said, I haven't seen any kind of reassurances or any communications from the government, reassuring people who are in this situation of that case, which is why I think it's important to just understand the process. So before the government can decide whether or not you should lose your status as a permanent resident, they have to do an evaluation of your residency obligation to ensure that you do not meet it. They also have to consider any explanations, any reasonable explanations that you have for not meeting those residency obligations. And they have to take into account humanitarian and compassionate reasons that you might be able to raise to preserve your status. So it sounds as though the scenario of Martha's client and the scenario that a lot of people who are abroad during the pandemic are facing can certainly be captured by some combination of a reasonable explanation and humanitarian and compassionate considerations. I think it was maybe Ling Ling or Natalia that talked about circumstances out of your control, right? And this is clearly a situation where, but for the pandemic and all of the restrictions that have come into place as a result of the pandemic, that person would return to Canada and continue to maintain their residency obligation. Even if the government decides to strip you of your permanent resident status because you don't meet a residency obligation, you can appeal that decision to the Immigration Appeal Division, which is a division of the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada. That is a quasi-judicial, it's sort of like a court, it's independent of the government. You can appeal the decision to that tribunal to make a case for why it is you shouldn't be stripped of your permanent residency status by virtue of not meeting that residency obligation. And certainly there, if you weren't able to make your case about humanitarian and compassionate reasons before the government, you will be able to make that case, especially in the pandemic setting, I would expect, at the Immigration Appeal Division. So that is the background or the process that one would have to go through in order to lose their permanent residency by virtue of a lack of meeting the residency obligation. Some of the practical advice that Ling Ling and Natalia talked about, very helpful. You know, examples of correspondence between a settlement agency and this person, saying and demonstrating that this person is trying, right? A letter saying that this person had made attempts to fill out the right forms, had a flight booked that was canceled. All of that is very persuasive evidence to support a case in order to preserve permanent residency in that situation.
I want to bring, yeah, thank you for that. Actually, I want to bring in Adriana. She's had her hand raised for a bit. She's one of our participants today. Adriana, thank you for joining us. Go ahead, you've got the floor. You can speak. Oh, I think, Adriana, are you still there? I think we just lost her. But she wrote us a question here. She says, my mom has a PR card that is going to expire in April. Can she fly before this card expires? I guess she kind of answered that question already about flights. We have Anna who has a question here, but right before I call on Anna, Prasanna, I want to ask you this myself. In situations like what you described, where it kind of gets confusing for us to decide where to go, what to do, is it advisable to go straight to a lawyer, or can they do this, all this, you know, can they find the solution on their own?
That's a good question. I think a good starting point would be a contact with a settlement worker or a settlement agency if possible, especially if they have a relationship already with your organization, for example. I think that's a good starting point. But I would say, sort of given all of the uncertainty that we're facing and some of the complications that arise in maintaining permanent residency, if possible, I would say seek legal advice as early as possible. Yes.
Thank you. Anna, I've just, if you can unmute, you can go ahead and ask your question. Anna, can you hear us? Okay, she's on there, but her mic is still muted. In the meantime, we have a question from Librada here in the chat room. She's asking, how long does it take to renew the PR due to delays of the pandemic situation, and how early do you recommend we should apply for renewal in order to avoid expiration? I think Ling Ling and Bisan, you both have experience in that. So either of you can answer that. Ling Ling, why don't you start?
Okay. So currently the processing time for renewing a permanent resident card is 91 days. So it's not that very long, but it's not short too, right? So, but check your processing time at the IRCC website, because it's always changing. But so far it's 91 days. And for renewing our permanent resident card, like how early? Okay. So you can renew your PR card as early up to 9 months before the expire date, but no beyond the 9 months. So within that timing, you are okay to renew the permanent resident card.
Okay, great. Adriana, we've got you back online. Do you have any additional questions? Okay, I don't think there's a connection probably issue with Adriana. Anna A, I'm not going to say your last name. You've also been given permission to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay.
Adriana.
Hi, my name is Adriana, and I have a quick question for you. I have my mom that she is in Colombia right now, and she has a permanent resident card. and the card is going to expire now in April. So due to the pandemic, she has been not able to travel from Colombia because I am scared to put her in a flight or be in the airport because her age, she is 84. So my question is, if in case that she can travel now, like in March, thinking about March, can she still travel if the resident card is going to expire in April?
Who would like to take that? Lisan, you want to take that? Or
Yes, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. The answer for the Adriana's question would be that yes, she can travel as long as the PR is not already expired. The risk would be when it's expired already, and we're gonna be coming back to the same situations that we have that the lawyer Adriana and my colleague Ling Ling and Natalia has talked about. But since the PR card is still valid, it's a good decision that to come back before it's expired.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Adriana.
I want to bring in, so I know,
We lost you, Miles.
hello?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, I want to bring in the case of refugees. So for those who have refugee protection in Canada, and what happens if they want to travel and they're under, the permanent resident status? What do they do? Can they travel as refugees, or
I can answer that question. For my experience with my clients that they have permanent resident status, they can apply for the travel documents and they can travel to countries that they accept the travel documents. But it's not a good idea for those who applied for refugee protection to go back to their own country of origin, since when they applied for refugee protection, they have sought refugee protection in Canada. And it's risky to go back to their own country, and most likely it's gonna affect their citizenship when they apply for the citizenship. I'm not sure if Prasanna can elaborate more on that, but this is the result of my experience with my clients. And it's actually very tricky because I get this question a lot from my clients that they wanna, when they get the PR and they're able to travel, they start asking questions that can they go back to their own country? Can they visit their family? And this comes the tricky situation where you can tell them that yes, you can travel because it's very risky. But yeah, the answer is that they can travel, but they can't go back to their own country of origin, especially those who have sought refugee protection.
There's a question here from Tina. She says, what is the difference basically of a PR refugee card, I guess a refugee who has a PR card, and other people who come to Canada like skilled workers or students or workers? I think that's a very general, broad question. But in terms of PR card, do they differ on what category you come to? I know Ling Ling, you worked in with different areas, different groups.
Yeah. So there's no difference in terms of the PR card, like among the people receiving the refugee or protection status to immigrant to Canada compared with the skilled worker immigration. And the only difference is just like Bizan mentioned, if the people immigrant to Canada under the refugee system, and it's better not to travel back to their origin of the country because of the risk. There's a risk. And for the people with other categories like the skilled workers, they are feel free to travel back to their origin of the country.
Okay. There is a question here.
Can sorry, Miles.
Yeah,
Do
go
you
ahead.
mind if I just hop in here for a second? Because I think the point that Bisan and Lingling made is very important, and especially for the participants of this webinar who have achieved permanent residency after being recognized as a protected person. It's very important to understand the restrictions on your travel, because if you don't, you risk triggering a process that might lead to losing not just your permanent residency, but your protected person status, okay? And be asked to return to your country of origin. So I just want to take a moment to just explain that in a little bit of detail. So first, what's important to know is that your protected person status in Canada can be canceled, or what they call cessated. That's the legal term for canceling or stopping your protected person status. And this happens when the government of Canada believes you did something to show that you no longer need Canada's protection, okay? And the two most common scenarios in which this happens is when someone who has received protected person status, even if they're a permanent resident, applies for or travels on a passport from their country of origin. Okay, so if you are, you know, my family's from Sri Lanka, we came as refugees. If I use a Sri Lankan passport, if I apply for a Sri Lankan passport, and then I use a Sri Lankan passport to travel, even if I don't return to Sri Lanka, let's say I use that passport to visit my family in the UK, that in and of itself, the simple act of getting travel documents from your country of origin might be grounds to trigger a cessation proceeding, okay? Which is why it's very important, if you're gonna travel as a permanent resident who is a protected person, you apply for the refugee travel document and not rely on the passport of your home country. That's number one. Number two, this happens. There are situations in which a protected person, even though they fear returning to their country of origin, and that's why they fled and received status here, have some exceptional reason why they need to go back. A dying family member, for example, okay? If you travel to your home country, you risk triggering a cessation proceeding. Even if you are a permanent resident and you have been a permanent resident for some time, okay? So you can be in Canada for many, many years. So long as you're a permanent resident that was somebody who was a protected person, you can risk losing both of them. So it's very important that you take those precautions of only traveling with a refugee travel document, and to the extent possible, do not return to your home country unless after you have become a Canadian citizen, and we can talk about that. If there are any questions about cessation and the proceeding in terms of how cessation happens, I'm happy to answer that, but I'll leave it there for now. But it is a very important point that needs to be appreciated, particularly because what we have seen in the last 3-4 years, and maybe, you know, you guys have experienced this at your agency, is that there has been a increase in the number of cessation applications that are brought. We have heard that CBSA has an internal target in terms of the number of cessation applications that they need to bring, and they've been very aggressive in pursuing this. And it's a very difficult situation to be in if you're a permanent resident who is a protected person.
Yeah, thank you, Prasanna. That's quite interesting. That's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
Huge gray area. That's why we have you here, I guess. And it really helps to know these things in advance. We have a question actually that came in Spanish, and Ana is the person who asked this question. She's got the floor. Ana,
Yes.
please go ahead. And you can even ask the question in Spanish. We have Natalia here who can.
Está bien.
Magic.
Sí, sí, mi niña está fuera de Canadá y su residencia ya se ha vencido por bastante tiempo. Entonces ella ya quiere regresarse a vivir aquí en Canadá para siempre, pero no sé cómo podría ser para hacer para que regrese.
Okay, thank you, Ana. Gracias. I'm going to ask all of you, and maybe Prasanna can answer the question directly. So the client is saying that her daughter is staying, who is a permanent resident of Canada, is staying in her country of origin. And she didn't say for how long. Maybe I'm going to ask her. Ana, ¿por cuánto tiempo ha estado su hija en otro país? Perdón, en Perú, ¿verdad? ¿En qué país ha estado?
No, en Guatemala.
Guatemala, perdón. ¿Por cuánto tiempo ha estado en Guatemala?
Pues ha estado, pues, bueno, ya tiene más de 2 años y algo, 3 creo yo, si se ha vencido su residencia, pero ella estuvo aquí hace un año. Ella se fue ahorita en enero de 2019. ¿Sí?
Okay.
Entonces, ella tiene, por ejemplo, su Health Card y su ID tiene al día, pero la residencia nunca la sacamos. Sí.
Ok, pero hay una cosa, o sea que está en Guatemala desde el 2019.
Ajá.
Okay. I'm going to resume the question. So she has been in Guatemala since 2019, January 2019, and her PR card expired. The question is what she needs to do in order to return to Canada.
Can I just ask, did she receive permanent residency after becoming a protected person in Canada?
Yes. Ana, la pregunta del abogado Prasanna es si ella recibió la residencia permanente luego de haber obtenido la protección.
¿Cómo es la protección?
La protección del refugio.
No, nosotros, mi esposo pues las sponsorió a mis hijas.
Okay. Gracias, Ana. No, it was a family sponsorship.
Okay, well then the process is relatively simple and should be straightforward. So we provided the link to, again, I can share my screen with you if that helps. So she has to apply for a permanent resident travel document, and we provided the link for that application in the chat. And you essentially, your daughter just needs to go through and follow the steps that are set out and receive that permanent resident travel document, and that will permit her to return to Canada. So just to rest assured, the mere fact that her PR card has expired, it doesn't mean her status has expired or lapsed. It is that she has to apply for this travel document in order to return.
Thank you, Prasanna. I just want to stress this issue that she may face with the residency obligations.
Right.
Because she mentioned, because when you apply for a permanent resident travel document outside of Canada, so you need to tell the officer how many days have you been in Canada in the last 5 years. And let's say if she hasn't been in Canada for at least 730 days in the last 5 years, she may face, another issue. Not only that her PR card expired, but also that she doesn't meet the residency obligations. So that's another thing. So I'm going to help this client to go through the process, even though she has to do it from outside Canada. She cannot do it from here, but I'm going to help her. I'm going to give her directions. So we are going to calculate together the days her daughter has been in Canada in the last 5 years. Now, if she doesn't meet the residency obligations, is it helpful? Will be helpful to write a letter, apply anyways, and submit a letter of explanation with, as you explained before, if it is sufficient reasons that the client cannot be in Canada for the time that is mandatory, right, to keep your status.
Yeah.
So that would be the first step to do.
Yeah, that would be exactly right, Natalia. I think that's the process to follow. And, you know, I don't know the answer to this, but perhaps part of the reason why she has remained in Guatemala for as long as she has is because of the pandemic, in which case you can provide that in the letter that Natalia is suggesting, you know, just anticipating that, just to seal that issue off and to say, here's an explanation, here's a complete explanation for why it is she remains there and why this travel document is necessary, to include that in the letter, for sure.
Thank you. And after that, if that is not acceptable for the government, then, you know, we can think about further steps, like you explained. Thank you so much.
Natalia, I don't know if Anna understood, if she understands English or speaks English. If we need to translate, maybe we can give
I will, absolutely.
a brief explanation. If she wants to meet with us one-on-one later on, we can always, our doors are open.
I can explain I can briefly explain her now, but I'm going to book an appointment. I mean, I'm going to assist this client on a one-on-one. Ana, sí puede aplicar por un Permanent Resident Travel Document en Guatemala, ¿ok? Hay un procedimiento, hay que hacer un cálculo de los días que yo le puedo ayudar, ¿ok? Pero podemos hacer una cita. ¿Le parece? I don't know if she's listening to me.
She's muted again, but so anyway, we have more questions.
Yeah.
We can follow up with Anna. Anna, thank you for that. Feel free to also chat with us in the chat room. I want to ask you about, so we know PR card, to maintain your status if you do everything right. I mean, you don't have to do much. If you're just sitting here, you're following by the rules, you know, you're fine. But it's the gray areas, the little things that we've been discussing, that things, you know, that we have questions about. But what happens if there's a criminal offense while you're still a permanent resident? Do you lose your PR status? Is this a matter that's taken up by the courts and it depends on your crime or what have you? So can we talk a little bit about that? Maybe Prasanna, do you have experience with that, or any of our team? If someone commits a crime, what happens to them while they're still a PR resident?
Sure. So as you said, Miles, I mean, hopefully what happens once you become a PR is you are able to meet all of the requirements and you apply for citizenship at the earliest possible opportunity. Okay, that would be the plan, I think, for everybody who has achieved permanent residency. But life is what it is. Things don't always go to plan, and sometimes bad things happen. One of the things that happens, that in addition to what we've been talking about in terms of residency obligation and in terms of travel, one of the most common ways in which people have their permanent residency become under threat is if they have been charged with or convicted of a serious criminal offense. Okay, so you could lose your permanent resident status and be forced to return to leave Canada if you've been found guilty by a criminal court in Canada, if the crime that you've been found guilty of or being convicted for is a serious crime, and Canada Border Service Agency, so the government, essentially takes steps to take away your permanent resident status and remove you from Canada. So what I want to do is maybe just focus a little bit on the process, just so people have some sense of what they might expect if they've been charged with a criminal offense. Would that be helpful? Actually, let me ask, what would be most helpful in terms of getting into this topic?
I mean, it's just to create more, it's just out of curiosity as well as to know, I guess there's different degrees of crimes, right? I mean, if it's a misdemeanor, it's different than if you go and, you know, commit murder, let's say. But you know, and then there was at one point, I remember a few years ago, under the previous government, I don't know if it's still enforced, where it was after even you receive your citizenship, if they found out that in previous years you had lied to the government before you got your PR card, or if you were involved in some sort of terrorist activity or whatever, you know, then you can lose your status as even a citizen. So I guess that's connected. I don't know if that's still the case.
Yeah, so let me address those two pieces. So first, let's just focus on what would be considered a serious crime that might trigger a process that leads to the loss of PR. And what is a serious crime is very specifically defined in the law. So there are two components or parts of the definition of a serious crime. The first is that the maximum sentence that you could possibly get for that particular criminal offense is 10 years or more in prison. It doesn't matter what it is you actually got as a prison sentence. All it matters is what the potential sentence is for that crime. So as long as the potential sentence is 10 or more years, it can qualify as a serious crime. The other component of that definition is if you get an actual sentence for that conviction of 6 months or more. So if you've been sentenced to jail for 6 months or more, it becomes a serious crime. So some examples of serious crimes, as you were talking about, Miles, that I've come across that are, you know, that have led to this sort of situation is using a false passport, driving while under the influence of alcohol or other drugs, threatening to harm someone, so threatening an assault, threatening to damage property, okay, actual assault, and theft. So these are all examples of crimes that may trigger an inadmissibility proceeding against you for serious criminality. I think what I'd say is if you've been charged with a crime, as in the police have laid a charge against you or your family member who has PR status or someone that you know who has PR status, I'd say you should get legal advice for both the criminal law aspect of it as well as the immigration law aspect of it, okay? There's criminal defense lawyers who will focus on the criminal case, but may not have a very deep understanding of the potential impacts on immigration. And so it's important to have that understanding as early as possible in the process. And the reason why I say that is a lot of criminal charges get resolved by way of some kind of agreement with the government, okay? They don't go to trial. It isn't the case that a judge will find someone guilty through a trial process. It's usually something that gets resolved through a plea agreement. So the person will say, you know, I accept that I did the things that the government is saying, and in order for me, and as a result of me accepting it, I will accept a certain sentence, or the court might impose a certain sentence. And it's very important to understand what the immigration consequence of that sentence is before you enter into that kind of agreement. So that's why I say get that immigration advice early on as part of that. So
let's say let's say you got convicted, or during your trial and you got convicted. From the time you got convicted and you were on bail, do your days count in your PR status days count while you're on bail or not?
No, in the context of applying for citizenship, actually, that's a good question. I need to check. So I know for certain days that you spend on probation are not counted towards days that are eligible to count for the residency obligation for a citizenship application. But on bail, I don't know. I'm going to have to check, Miles. I can get back to you. I don't think that, I think it ought to be able to be counted because you are entitled to the presumption of innocence. You haven't been found guilty. There's no reason for why those days shouldn't count. But I want to be sure about that. So I can double check.
So technically, if you have a few days, like you're still on the PR, but you applied for your citizenship, and then your citizenship is round the corner and you have a court case, you could become a citizen while that, trial is still hanging, I guess. Maybe it's a rare case, but.
No, there is some law that will prevent the granting of citizenship when someone is facing serious criminal charges. So there is a mechanism there that'll prevent someone from going forward to get that. But it's a rare case, but you should just be aware of that. Yeah.
No, thank you for illustrating that. That's quite interesting. I know we scheduled this for an hour, but if you don't mind, we can have a few more minutes as we have a few more questions coming in. We have, if that's okay, we have Taranbir, who's been with us for a while. He has a question for us, so I'm going to give him the floor. Taranbir, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you so much. And Prasanna, I have a question. I'm a medical doctor, and I'm going for the my residency exams. Now I have the option for doing the residency in Canada and overseas. Canada is okay, I know. I mean, but if I get a good opportunity overseas, say in US or in the Europe, and most of the those residencies, more than 3 years up to 6 years. So what happens in these cases if I accept a residency and we have an obligation to covered almost 2 years in a 5-year bracket. So how I, do that? Um, uh, like I maintain the 722 days in 5 years while doing my residency overseas. So that's my case because it will affect my decision to take the residency or not.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I mean, if what you're telling me, from what it sounds as though, if you accept a residency outside of Canada, you're just going to have trouble meeting the residency obligations by virtue of sort of the demands of your residency program. And that, to my mind, is not something that you will be able to overcome through some kind of explanation or appeal to humanitarian and compassionate considerations. The entire point or rationale of the residency obligation is to try and ensure that there's a sufficient enough physical connection to Canada that gets maintained over that period, on the theory that that physical connection is going to lead to other forms of deeper connections to the country, settlement, integration, all of those things, right? So I think you have an important decision to make in terms of what's best for you and maybe your family. But I don't really see a way for you to both do a residency outside of Canada and have a legal way of maintaining your residency obligation. But I don't know, Ling and the rest of the staff, I don't know if you guys have had experiences similar to this or.
Yeah, Natalia wants to jump in on that one. Go ahead. Your mic is muted.
Yeah. No, I just want to add something. I am still. Okay, so I just want to add something to what Prasanna was saying. So beside the humanitarian and compassionate reasons that is discretionary, because the government needs to make that decision if they accept or not that reason, there are situations that exempt the person who is a permanent resident to stay in Canada for 730 days. It's like if you are going to work outside Canada, but the company, let's say you are working here at a Canadian company and you're going to be transferred to another country where the company has another branch, then that is, you are going to be exempted. But the company needs to be Canadian company outside Canada. Let's say you are going to be working outside Canada at a Canadian company. Then, you have a valid reason not to meet the residency obligations. Also, if you are permanent resident of Canada, but you are accompanying a Canadian citizen who is outside of Canada. And those are exceptions. Actually, if you, when you fill out the form, the application form to renew the PR card, it's listed there. So if you fit into that category, if that situation applies to you, then you may be exempted from the 730 days.
Thank you, Natalie. Can you explain the second clause which you just told? What is that? Can you explain it again, please?
The second situation.
Yes.
The second one. So if you are a permanent resident of Canada, okay, and you are accompanying a Canadian citizen as a family member, let's say you are married to a Canadian person, a Canadian citizen, okay, you don't need to be, obviously, you are a permanent resident, but let's say your wife is a Canadian citizen and your wife needs to stay outside Canada for work or for a valid reason, and you are accompanying your wife because your wife is a family member, so you may be exempted from the 730 days in the last 5 years. And if you are a permanent resident and you are going to be transferred from the company, the Canadian company inside Canada, to the same company that has a branch outside Canada, but it's a Canadian company, you are going to be exempted as well. And that is, is an information that you can find in the form. And you can find that information in the website, in the official website. Those situations, may apply to you, may apply to people who are not going to meet the residency obligations, but they have a valid reason. It's a reason that the government, consider, take into consideration. Beside the humanitarian and compassionate grounds, but the humanitarian and compassionate grounds is more discretionary. In all these situations, you need to show proof, of course, that that situation applies to you.
Taranvir, can I ask, are you presently in Ontario, or are you?
Yes, I'm in Ontario. Yeah.
So are you planning to be there in the States or Europe soon, or?
Yes, I'm applying, and I mean, within a couple of months, I will be given a decision, and I'm hopeful I will get an offer overseas.
Well, yeah, we wish you all the luck, and
Thank you.
also we want to congratulate you on the success that you have. It's always great to hear of achievers that come to this country and achieve. They work on themselves. This is the whole point of programs like this, and we celebrate that. So we thank you, and we thank all the others that have come here and made.
And thank you so much for your well wishes. And I have a very quick question for you as well. I mean, regarding this PR obligations. So if we are Canadian PRs and our children are also Canadian PR, but if we as a parent decide that our children should for the time being study in our country of origin for say 3-4 years, so what happens in those cases? So we have to again apply for their PR status before the age of 18? So how it goes is,
Ling Ling, you want to take that one, or Natalia? Ling Ling?
I just would like him to repeat the question because a little bit confused for me.
So, okay, so say we as a parent are both permanent resident, and we have a daughter, right? She is also permanent resident. Now my question is, if we decide as a parent so that our child should spend some years of our schooling in India, we belong to India for say 3 or 4 years, and what happens after 3 or 4 years because he's not maintaining those 730 or 700 something days in 5 year bracket. So do we have to apply again for her PR, or how it goes is?
Can I just quickly footnote there? So you're saying if the kid is in India, but you're still here, right?
Yes, we are still here. Yeah.
You're still here, right? Go ahead.
Yes.
Nick.
Okay, for the permanent resident, like status or any renewed permanent resident card application, it's the same for both adult and the children. It's different from the Canadian citizenship application. So the kids are also needed to have the physical presence in Canada for at least 730 days or 2 years in the past 5 years. So that's the physical application for keeping your permanent resident status in Canada, like even for kids. And is that the answer for you, or have any?
So okay. So if they
Sorry, Dharanbir, can I cut you short there because
yeah.
only because I'm conscious of time. I suggest, because this is more of a settlement issue, I feel. I don't want to go off topic, but I mean, it's a very valid question you got. So I suggest we'd love to meet with you one-on-one. Maybe book a session and we can give you more advice on how to deal with that. Because I feel it's a more specific case. Would that be good for you?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
We will get someone to contact you after the session.
Just give us a call and to make appointment with any of our settlement workers. We can, talk one-on-one for this specific, case.
Sure, I will.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I've just a few more questions there before we wrap up. We've got some in the chat room coming in the Q&A. So we have Isabel, who says her daughter sent her information or pictures to get her PR card months ago, but she hasn't received her PR card. I'm not sure where she's, what advice you would give her. So what's supposed to do? They're supposed to contact the government, I guess, in such a case? I would, right? Call back.
If this is the first time to get the permanent resident card, maybe some pictures or something wrong, they need her to send a new picture, and it will take a little bit time to get back. But if say it's renewal PR card and you send a picture, it's not correct, and they send you the letter back and ask for the new pictures, you can check your application status on IRCC website. And if there's no any update, and you can contact the IRCC through web form or like call the phone line. Yeah.
Tina's got a question here. She's asked, usually how long does it take to get a PR card as a protected person?
It's really varies because it's depend on the family's situation. So based on my experience, some of my clients got their permanent residence for like within 2 years, and some maybe get longer because of background check, and some may get less. So it's really varies. Yeah.
Right. She also has another question for us. She says, do you know which countries accept travel documents? I guess there's a list online, or is it all countries? And she specifically mentions Turkey, the UAE, like Dubai, or other countries in the Middle East.
Yeah, check our IRCC website. They have the list of the countries. Yeah.
Maybe we can put a link in the chat there for you as well. And so I think that's, if there's any other comments that because we've got a few more questions here, but I think they're becoming repetitive a bit, about renewing after they've left or it's been a long time. So if they lose their PR card, this is actually interesting. If they lose their PR card and they've been abroad for so long and decide to come back to Canada, I guess the answer is to reapply again, right, from scratch. Like
Okay.
you don't have any kind of priority. If you lost your permanent resident status, you know, and then you left the country, and then many years from now you decide, or 2 years from now you decide to come back. I think Natalia has something to say there. Unmute, please. Yes.
Just to clarify, I know we have to be mindful about time. Just to clarify that there is a difference, you know, between losing your PR status and your PR card and having a PR card that is expired. So, like Prasanna was explaining at the beginning, so it's not a straightforward process that you're going to lose your PR status. And also you can, you know, if you overstay outside Canada and you do not meet the residency obligations, so you can actually and I don't know, the government decide that they are going to revoke your PR status. So there is a process that you can engage in. So an appeal process in the Immigration Appeal Division. So it's not that you're going to lose your PR card status right away because you overstay. And it's not that simple. Now, if your PR card expire, okay, being outside of Canada, then you can try and apply for a permanent resident travel document to come back to Canada with that document, and that is going to be valid at the airport. And then being in Canada, you can apply for a new PR card, okay, if that is the case. Just want to clarify because I think there is a little bit of confusion. And as Prasanna was explaining, it's not a straightforward process. But I don't know if you have some minutes, maybe he can explain more, or maybe, you know.
Yeah, Prasanna, do you have any points on that?
It's okay.
I don't have.
It's clear.
Yeah, I think Natalia, I think you explained it like beautifully. Just because your permanent residence card expires, it doesn't mean you've lost your permanent residence status. You should know that it is not something that automatically gets lost. There has to be specific steps that the government takes in order to strip you of that. And even if the government has taken that step, you will have a right of appeal to the Immigration Appeal Division where you can appeal that case. So only after your appeals have been exhausted can you consider that to be a final decision that you've lost your permanent residency and you have to leave Canada. And if that's the situation and you've spent many years in your home country, then yes, I mean, you would have to re-engage in a process by which you may be able to return to Canada through immigration and such to receive permanent residency again.
We'll take one more question before we wrap up. And I just want to say to everyone who's attending, so to find out more about this session or even view the recording afterwards, I've just looked into the chat, in the chat room. I've just wrote there's a link there. So it's mnlct.org/askmnlct. And also, I don't know how many of you are aware of our iSent app. So you can visit mnlct.org/app. So this iSent app, you can connect with us directly, download it from Google or Apple Store, whatever you prefer, and search for iSent. So you can contact us directly, book an appointment, and there will be a lot of FAQs. There's so much information in there about settlement, language, whatever your needs are. But that's one way to connect with us as well. So for those of you who wanted to book an appointment, that's another way of connecting with us. We've got one question here. I'll take the last one from William. William says his PR card was expired. He requested the PR card to be renewed, but the status is in process, has been in process for a long time. He wants to know how he should proceed to know how long how long the time is, like how long it will take to get his PR card, I guess. I was written, and the only answer was to have to wait. He said he got a written answer, and he says to wait to complete the process. So I think, I don't know if I got that right. Did you catch that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, some of the applicants will receive the letter indicating your application has been go through the second review. And in that case, there is no a certain time of the processing time for this type of the review. So it may take longer based on your based on the current like processing cases, and also some documents they needed to check for your application. So in that case, if you like need your permanent resident card urgently, you can apply for the urgent processing your permanent resident card application. On the IRCC website, there's a search bar. You just put the keyword urgent processing your PR card. They will come up the ways how do you provide these kind of processing. They will ask for the reasonable explanation with the supporting documents, and you can submit through the web form and also by mail. So I don't know, is the answer to your question?
I think so, yes. I think that was a most wonderful answer. Thank you very much. I like to close now, and if there's unless there's any last thoughts or any last words from anyone, I would like to add something that we may have missed, but I think you guys all were wonderful and nailed it. So I just
have Miles, I just
Yeah.
have a quick question for Prasanna. For those who have lost the PR status in Canada due to criminal records, what are their options? Because I have a client that's going through this situation right now. She has gone through a criminal record and she has lost her PR status. So,
Bisan, what I might suggest is maybe that you and I connect, and I just need to ask a bunch more questions just to understand the situation a little bit better. And
okay. Yeah,
Miles,
that's good.
I mean, I'm happy to connect tomorrow or early next week, but yeah, I'd love to assist.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Prasanna, thank you for joining us today. I know it's busy period for all of us, especially when you're working from home or online. These things can get a bit more kind of harder to reach out to, to explain and reach out to clients. But I want to thank everyone, each and every one of you, Ling Ling, Natalia, Bisan, and Prasanna, who joined us today from downtown legal services. So thank you for our attendees, and as always, feel free to join us in the future for other Ask MNLCT webinars. We have one next month coming up. It's more focused on the media, and those who have media aspirations, they will find this interesting. I'm going to be sharing on the screen here. As you can see, you can contact us by phone or by email. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact us anytime. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day. Stay safe. And I hope you and your families are all safe and well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.